A blueprint for Pac-12 expansion, changes to the playoff, and oh my goodness, quarterback bonanzas today on the show.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. Shout out to my everydayers out there. And, oh man, I tell you what. BYU has picked a starting quarterback. Notre Dame has picked a starting quarterback. Two of the wildest battles that you need to hear about, and we will indeed get to them on today's show. But I had a thought when I saw the Pac-12 announced that Dallas Baptist, currently a member of Conference USA, will be a baseball member of the league going forward. I saw it and everything just, the lights went on in my head. It's like I needed to be in one of those spas or salons or whatever you see on TV, and you got the hairdryer thing on, and then boop, the light comes on. Something like that made me go, oh my gosh. So yeah, they can and they should go out and add another football-only member for two reasons. Number one, currently, Texas State is the only school the Pac-12 has starting in 2026 that gets them into the state of Texas. If you truly value, obviously they do at some level or they wouldn't have added the Bobcats, having a presence in that state, do you want to just have the one team? There are a lot of Division I football playing schools in Texas. So the value of getting out there and also potentially bringing in a program that maybe, depending on who it would be, maybe it'd be Rice. Maybe they wouldn't do a whole heck of a lot. Maybe they would just be there and serve as a win more often than not for some of the top teams in your conference. That's not the worst thing in the world either. But maybe you bring somebody in who does a group of five version of what Indiana did this past year, where they burst onto the national scene. Hopefully they don't do the scheduling thing I talked about yesterday, because that's utter nonsense. But they burst on the national scene and they explode, and one coach changes the whole trajectory of the program, and all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, that's a legitimate team right there. Well, you won't know unless you add that particular type of program, whether that's a UTSA, that would be great. The rivalry factor would be great. Or it's a North Texas, or it's a Rice, or I don't think you'd be able to persuade Memphis. But one of those other Texas schools, I think would make a good deal of sense for that reason. And for the reason that playing 8 conference games helps solidify your schedule and helps strengthen your schedule. The Pac-12 over the last couple of years has seen the difficulty of putting together a college football schedule on the fly, and I think that they're somewhat moving into the territory that college basketball teams run into at the mid-major level. They struggle to get high-profile programs to come and play them because for those big schools, there's not a lot of upside and there's real downside because, oh, you're supposed to win this game, so therefore we don't get a lot by winning, but if we lose, we were supposed to win the game, and suddenly we're getting punished. I wonder if that comes into the Pac-12 scheduling mentality or any difficulty like that. But if you have the option of playing another solid group of 5 team that's a part of your conference, just in a football capacity, if you have the option of doing that, or, well, let's see what we can get. That see what we can get, that brings a lot of mystery. That brings a lot of unknown. That brings a lot of I'm not sure what exactly that is going to look like. Maybe in a return to regionality, you'll get more games like Oregon State has Cal at home this year. They've also got Houston coming to town and some other matchups like that. Maybe Stanford and Cal would be more willing to play some of those games. I don't think they ever return to the Pac-12 one day, but maybe they'd come back to that. But I saw that piece of news and thought to myself, man, if the Pac-12 is willing to go get a sports-only member in 2 different sports now. They've got it, Gonzaga, or I think Gonzaga's got the rest of their sports as well. But Dallas Baptist is baseball only. Go add a football-only member. Why not? What's the downside? Like, legitimately, what is it? Let me know in the comments. Just one more football only member. What is the downside? I think there's only upside there. So that was the first thing I wanted to touch on today. Did you see what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee did? They just released some criteria. Oh, by the way, we're gonna kind of alter how we view schedules and strength of schedules and evaluate teams for selection into the playoff this year. Huh? The season starts in 2 days. Kansas State plays Iowa State this week, and there are changes. So there's plenty of writing about all of this out there. The most important thing to know, and Brandon Marcello tweeted this out, quote, an additional metric, record strength, has been added to the selection committee's analysis to go beyond a team's schedule strength to assess how a team performed against that schedule. This metric rewards teams defeating high-quality opponents while minimizing the penalty for losing to such a team. I don't actually object to that. Conversely, these changes will provide minimal reward for defeating a lower quality opponent while imposing a greater penalty for losing to such a team, end quote. What does that sound like to you? Does it read to any of you out there like the Indiana SMU response? Because that's how it feels to me. Now, I am not going full DEFCON 1. Believe 1 is the most dramatic. I should know that off the top of my head. I am not going full red alert on, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. Oh, look, the SEC's getting there. What? As I've pointed out all offseason, the concern that the committee is going to be just wildly pro-SEC all the time is valid because the sport has been that way for a while. Last year, the committee wasn't. Were they as pro-Big 12 or ACC as they should have been? In the view of many people, probably not. BYU was 10-2 with a road win against a playoff team. Why didn't they get more playoff discussion last year? I don't think they got enough. So I think it's really easy to read this as the SEC is now going to, or the Big Ten perhaps, but the SEC probably is where people's worry is at more than anything else. They're going to look at this and say, oh my gosh, now the SEC is going to be rewarded for quality losses, which I don't actually disagree with. But I think there's a line in there that actually contradicts itself, and I just want to see how this plays out. Maybe this changes nothing, because they're saying analysis to go beyond a team's schedule strength to assess how a team performed against that schedule. Conversely, these changes will provide minimal reward for defeating a lower quality opponent. Well, first of all, how do you determine a lower quality opponent? And second of all, if you do apply this to Indiana directly a season ago, the Hoosiers went through that strength of schedule, which was not as difficult as other teams in college football, and they had an average margin of victory that was almost identical. I think it was within a point or two of 2023 Michigan. And at that point, the brand bias is why people were saying Indiana shouldn't have been in that spot, because I don't remember as serious of a conversation a couple years ago with regards to Michigan. And well, they didn't do that. Now the Wolverines, of course, went on to beat Ohio State and win the national championship. Indiana lost to Ohio State and then lost in the first round of the college football playoff. But I know there were plenty of folks, and I understand the instinct to say, this is going to be an SEC. I'm like, I want to wait and see. I see how this could go poorly. I don't think it's automatically bad. I don't know. I didn't have as strong of a reaction to it, frankly, as I thought I would, or that some of you probably thought I would. I read it and went, oh, okay, well, let's see what that means and then assess. Because getting worked up about a hypothetical, I don't know that that's really worth it at this point in time. But if you feel differently, let me know in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. All of that good stuff. BYU is making history. First, this episode brought to you by Rugia. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch, and now you can too. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get 15% off today. That's rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Check them out at rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. We've got a starting quarterback in Provo. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars is here to discuss Bear Bachmeyer, true freshman, is being handed the reins. And Jake, I have heard plenty from BYU fans, some of whom, okay, let me rephrase, most of whom are very upset with me for my take on BYU and that I don't think the magic gets repeated. You're starting a true freshman at quarterback, and you know what? Jake Retzloff surprised me last year. I haven't tried to hide behind that incorrect take, but Retzloff at least had starting experience somewhere. Bachmeyer's going to take his first snap this season. I mean, does this give you any pause at all?
Oh, absolutely. Come on. There's always the unknown, because this last time this kid took snaps, he was in high school, Spencer. He's not going to be playing at the Power 4 level. Now, the season opener for BYU is Portland State, which is one of the worst teams in the FCS level, particularly the Big Sky Conference. So it's a soft landing for him. But yes, it is a crazy thought that he is 19 years old. He's never taken a snap in Division I football, and he's BYU starting quarterback.
Yeah, the Portland State angle is something that BYU fans should feel really good about. Not everybody has an easy first game. Yeah. You know, one of the more interesting games on BYU's schedule, I think, is when they play Colorado. I believe they have that game on the road in Boulder. That's going to be a really fun Mountain Time kickoff. And Colorado starts this year with Georgia Tech, who is my top dark horse team in the ACC. I have them power rated number 4. That would be a rude entrance into college football if you're Bear Bachmeyer. And I think that helps at least a little, but you know, you've said before you think BYU starts 5-0 with the games they have early on. It does work out very favorably. I think they're winning at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 of their first games there. But what's your confidence level that Bear Bachmeyer can, wearing number 47, which, oh man, we might have to do a whole portion of the segment on that. What's your confidence level that Bear Bachmeyer is going to be the starting quarterback at BYU, 5-0, and maybe ranked inside the top 25?
I think there's a decent odds because the opening slate is Portland State, home to Stanford, at East Carolina, at Colorado, home to West Virginia, and then at Arizona, I believe, is the first 6 games. And it's about as soft of a opening 6 games you could hope for if you're BYU, and it's not any fault of their own. That's just the way the schedule broke for them. So they're going to take advantage of this, and I would expect, Spencer, I would say 5-1 seems like a realistic scenario here. And even at 5-1, BYU should be ranked in the top 25 easily, considering they're one spot out of the top 25 right now.
Let's not overlook the fact that week 2 is what we're dubbing Bachmeyer's revenge at the farm, because the situation at Stanford, I don't know if you've talked about him on your podcast to BYU fans, but the situation's about as unique as you can get. Every single social post I see from Stanford football has Andrew Luck in it, and that's not by accident. And he looks like the head coach. He's not. It's Frank Reich. Okay. I hope he's not the long-term answer there for Stanford's sake. This could be a really rough season for the Cardinal, who are starting Oregon State legend Ben Gulbranson at quarterback. And, you know, Gulbranson was indeed the architect of a famous comeback against my Ducks in 2022. And by architect, I mean he kept handing the ball off because Oregon State completed like 7 passes in the game and still won, and completed a 20-plus point comeback. It wasn't Dan Lanning's finest moment. But that game on the farm, It can get weird, Jake. For those who don't know, it can get weird because there isn't really a big environment, and there won't be this year, I don't think, because the program is in this transitionary phase where Luck has taken the reins. Do you have any concern about that game?
Well, it's a home game for BYU. To be clear about that, it's
my fault. I switched that in Colorado in my head.
But to your point, you make a good point. There's a lot of things going on with the Stanford Cardinal right now, and I'm going to say it right now. If Bear Bachmeyer were still in Palo Alto, he'd be Stanford starting quarterback right now. I got no problem saying that because he was already in the mix through the 2 or 3 weeks. He was in spring camp before he left Stanford. So it's a big opportunity for BYU, and you're right. Stanford, they've already said that Frank Reich, this is a 1-year deal, and they're going to look for a new head coach after this season. But that just screams to me that this is like full tear down to the studs mode, and Stanford could be in it absolutely in the woes of it, and BYU should take advantage of that.
And BYU should, building on my semi-incorrect point from earlier in the segment, be grateful they don't have to go to the farm because it can get weird. At LaVell Edwards Stadium, that's a different matter. But the second half of the season is where BYU's campaign should get defined. Every coach will tell you one game at a time, most important games, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Colorado is when things really start. I don't think West Virginia is on the same level as BYU this year. They're in their first year with Rich Rodriguez. But Colorado and then the back half is where it gets tough. Jake Retzlaff last year didn't put up insane numbers, but had some pretty insane moments. The Oklahoma State, the Utah games late in those late game scenarios. Can Bear Bachmeyer as a true freshman deliver those same sorts of results?
Well, that's what you're banking on, is the fact that he takes advantage of an early slate of easy games on paper. And then by the time you mentioned that tough stretch comes up at Colorado, and then you kick off a 4-game stretch against Utah, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, and then home to TCU. Those 5 games are going to define the season for BYU. The nice part is 4 of those are games 7 through 10 for BYU. And you hope those first 6 games that he settles in. As you mentioned, a guy like Jake Retzlaff didn't put up gaudy numbers, but when they needed him most, he made a big play after big play in close games. That's what you got to see from Bear Bachmeyer, is he's taking advantage of the opportunities given to him. And the nice part is he's got a lot of veteran players around him, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and offensive line. They're going to have to buoy him up in multiple moments, it feels like.
Over on my Oregon pod, I do something called Spencer's Scale of Agreement, where a take is submitted, and then I give 1 to 10 how strongly I agree with it. Yeah. I'm going to put you on the spot for Jake's scale of agreement this year. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
You got to go 1 to 10, 1 being I don't agree at all, I couldn't disagree more, 10 being I've already given this take, why don't you listen to my show? Bear Bachmeyer will have a better statistical season in 2025 than Jake Retzlaff did in 2024.
Ooh, I will say 6 on that one. I think he can approximate the numbers that Jake Retzlaff put up, because they're not by any means. He didn't put up 4,000 yards. He didn't put up 40 touchdowns. These numbers that Jake Retzlaff had a season ago are imminently approachable by a guy like Bear Bachmeyer, as young as he is. If he's everything that BYU coaches have believed him to be, and they say he is, he's got the capability of matching those numbers, if not exceeding them to by just a little bit. I'm not going to say he's going to blow by him, but if he exceeds them, BYU is going to be right there in the mix all season long.
When was the last time BYU started a true freshman at quarterback?
Well, so the thing is, they started a true freshman with Zach Wilson back in 2018 or 2019. But this is history, Spencer, because this is the first true freshman to start the season opener for BYU ever in 100 seasons of football. They've never done this before. They've had true freshmen play, but they have never started the very first game.
See, now that's so Portland State is going to be a historic game. That is BYU's been playing football a long time. I'm like trying to take that in. This has never happened before in the history of BYU football. And I also have to imagine no one's ever worn the number 47 behind center. Jake, tell me, how many games is it going to take you to get used to seeing number 47 behind center?
Well, I've been out to about 8 practices so far, and I'm still not used to it, having stood there and watched him wear it and called signals and all that stuff. So I think it's going to take me multiple games to really get comfortable with it, but I'm not the only one. The nation is going to really kind of sit up and be like, hold on, There's this quarterback wearing 47. What's going on here? And the other thing about it, Spencer, the number 47 holds a lot of sway in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints community because 1847 is when Mormon pioneers first rolled into the Salt Lake Valley. The Wi-Fi code for all LDS chapels, the church houses for Mormon churches for years was Pioneer 47. There's some Spencer, there's some connections here that
okay. I might have to change my tune. BYU might be winning the national title this year.
And Spencer, we call the 24th of July, like the celebration up here, the parade we have in the state of Utah. It's like our second 4th of July. It's called the Days of 47. What else we got going on?
Oh my goodness.
On now.
Okay. History is being made. Fate is being tempted. Welcome to BYU football with Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars. Great as always. An equally dramatic, but for different reasons, quarterback battle in South Bend has played itself out, and I love it for Notre Dame. First, this episode brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep personal and business calls separate? Open Phone solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more who's handling this, who's on top of that. Open Phone consolidates it all. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. And this episode brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks as well, because football season's around the corner. The daily fantasy platform that you want to go to is Prize Picks. It lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason's already heating up. College football literally starts later this week. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. For this weekend, Prize Picks is offering major max discounts. So you could go with Avery Johnson. You could go with Dak Prescott. And whoever you're feeling confident about, or you feel confident in fading, go put your money where your mouth is with Prize Picks. You pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if your picks are right, you could cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game. We have also got a starting quarterback revelation in South Bend, because we know for sure what we thought we knew, but then knew wasn't going to happen, but now we know is going to happen. CJ Carr is starting for Notre Dame. No better person to talk about that with than Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish. Can we start with the craziness of how this unfolded? Because once Steve Angeli left, he's at Syracuse now. Most people, myself included, presumed, well, and you told me this as well, it's going to be CJ Carr. And then all of a sudden it was, no, it doesn't look like it's going to be up. And then it's CJ Carr. What happened here, Tyler?
Dude, it depends on who you ask at this point. Like, I have talked about this so much on my show, talking about it with other people, talking to sources that I really trust. And in the end, like, I was looking forward to the finality of the decision for so long. Like, I remember back in like middle of June, we're doing a show every day, obviously a Locked On. And I was thinking, we are still so far away from a decision. Like, how can I get any last bit of juice out of this quarterback competition? And then it starts. Then it finally, where it's a 2-week sprint, basically. That was sort of the idea. Notre Dame opened up fall camp July 31st. And like everything I had been hearing all summer, ever since the spring, really, was that odds are it's going to be CJ Carr. There was always going to be a legit competition. They let it play out on the field, and Kenny Minchie is no slouch. Like, top 200 prospect in high school. He's been around for one more year than CJ Carr, even though they have the same amount of time in Mike Denbrock's system. So I always felt like he's being a little counted out, just because I thought he was a better player than maybe people were giving him credit for. And then Notre Dame barely lets any media get into the practices for 2 weeks. I think part of that has to do with the fact that they open up against Miami. And in the first week, you started hearing buzz like, hey, Kenny Minchey's in this thing. CJ Carr threw 3 interceptions in the first day in practice. The one practice that all the media was allowed to see, he throws 3 picks. One wasn't his fault, but still, that kind of lingers. Then you start hearing that Kenny Minchey is playing pretty well. And then in the second week, there's reports from like Pete Nakos at On 3 that Kenny Minchey has the edge. And everyone's like, what is happening? And then they have a big scrimmage on Sunday, this past Sunday, and it sounded like Minchey played pretty well. Marcus Freeman spoke to the media afterwards, said, hey, this has been a really close competition. We got to make a decision here soon. Everyone in the media all of a sudden changes their tune and says it's going to be Kenny Minchey after literally 7 months. Every day it's going to be CJ Carr, and then it's CJ Carr. So I looked at my phone, and I can't say what I said in the moment on this podcast. We'll keep it PG, but I was surprised at how surprised I was when it was announced. Let's just call it that.
Good idea, keeping it PG. I assume you like your job. I like my job. I'm not that great at editing, like that could get dicey. So let's talk about CJ Carr, though, because this is a guy who Steve Angeli took one look at in the spring and said, nope, I'm in the portal because I want to go somewhere where I'm going to play. And obviously Minchey a part of that in all likelihood as well. But what do you think set CJ Carr over the top in the minds of this Notre Dame coaching staff to where they're saying, okay, we're trying to follow up a national runner-up season, and this is the guy we want to go with?
I think there is a elite quarterback in him, and I think he makes elite throws that, frankly, a Notre Dame quarterback hasn't made since Jimmy Clausen, and I know those teams were terrible, but he actually was a good college quarterback. He just had
what
the
a
worst
name.
defense.
I
know. We're going back to 2009.
Oh, gosh, that took me back. Sorry, that's just, I was transported with the name Jimmy Clausen.
If you really want to feel old, think about this. 2009, Notre Dame has Jimmy Clausen, who has statistically one of the best seasons of any quarterback in Notre Dame history. I'm pulling up his stats right now, getting research on this as we speak. But he also had Golden Tate on his offense. He had Michael Floyd, who's a first-round pick, and he had Kyle Rudolph. That team went 6-6. Anyway, I digress. He was a really good quarterback. Brady Quinn, really good quarterback. He could make some really impressive throws. Like CJ Carr can do stuff that they could do. I loved Ian Book, winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history. He's not the passer that CJ Carr is. The issue is CJ Carr is only a redshirt freshman. And I think we've seen, especially in recent years, from guys like Jane Daniels and Bo Nix, experience is so important in college football. So Carr is going to make mistakes. I think there's going to be some serious growing pains early on, but I think in the eyes of the Notre Dame coaching staff, the rest of the team is so good that they'll be able to survive while Carr kind of deals with those lumps. And I think the idea is by the end of the season, when hopefully Notre Dame is right there in the college football playoff hunt, he'll have grown out of those mistakes. And then by the time the playoffs come around, he'll be, one of the best quarterbacks or one of the best throwers. He's still going to be prone to mistakes, but it is a long-term bet with real short-term or potential consequences.
A piece of good news and a question for you. The good news of his lack of experience, he's not the only one for a major team in college football this year,
right,
who's starting with not much or no experience. You've got Julian Sain at Ohio State. If you showed me 5 different shadow passing motions and one of them was Julian Sain, I'd have no idea which one it was. You've got Dante Moore at Oregon. I mean, you've got Cade Klubnik at Clemson and Drew Aller at Penn State. For the top teams this year, I mean, we've seen Arch Manning a little. We've seen Dante Moore a little. We don't really know what those guys are going to be in their college careers. We don't know what Julian Sain's going to be. So that's the good news there. Same thing with Gunnar Stockton at Georgia. It's like, I don't really know. I think I know, but I haven't seen a full season. The question, though, how does CJ Carr this year compare to the Notre Dame passing game last year? And your answer here could make me like Notre Dame even more come playoff time, because as we all know, the passing game was limited last season. The wide receiver room, Great House, of course, popped in the playoff game, but it was overall kind of It was just okay. So how do you feel about the guy CJ Carr's throwing the ball to?
I think the wide receivers are significantly better. I think the additions to the transfer portal have been great. They added Malachi Fields, who produced a ton at Virginia the past 2 years, had over 800 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns each of the past 2 seasons, and they barely had a functioning quarterback in that Cavalier offense. And then they added Will Pauling from Wisconsin, who is a name that most people probably don't know. He didn't produce a ton last year because Tyler Van Dyke got hurt, and again, Wisconsin did not have a quarterback. But if you go back 2 years ago, he had over 70 receptions, nearly 1,000 yards receiving. So I think he's a nice addition to go along with Jane Greathouse and Jordan Faison. Hopefully, in Jane Greathouse's 3rd year with the team, he looks like the player that everyone saw in the college football playoff and not the first 14 games of the season where he was good, but it wasn't anything spectacular. But what I look at this Notre Dame offense, part of the reason they pick Carr is because he can push the ball down the field. He can be really aggressive. So it's going to look like a much different offense. They're not going to be running QB power 8 times to the first series of the national championship again. That's not going to be the playbook this year. But they're going to push it down the field more, which is a bit in contrast to how past offenses on different teams have kind of utilized their young quarterback. Like, look at Drew Aller when he's a redshirt freshman, right? Drew Aller was supposed to be the guy to take Penn State and bring them to another level. And maybe that happens this year. But I think even the biggest Drew Aller supporters, the biggest Penn State fans, will admit it took a little bit longer than they would have hoped. I think they were expecting him to play like that right away. It didn't happen. And they, for all consideration, they kind of babied him. His average completion in 2023 when he was a redshirt freshman, 6.8 yards. Yes, he threw for 25 touchdowns, but only 2 interceptions. And I know that looks good on paper, but it's because they just didn't trust him to make any throws against good teams. I don't think that's going to be the case with CJ Carr. I think they're going to let it rip, and that could end up being the reason they get back to the college football playoff, and that could also be the reason that they don't make it back.
I think Notre Dame is going to have 3 plays in their playbook this year. 26 power, 26 power play action, and all goes. That's all I want from Mike Denbrock this year. I don't want to see any RPOs. I don't want to see slant. I want goes or power. There's nothing in between that needs to happen in South Bend, as far as I'm concerned. Do you think that's a sound offensive game plan?
Well, you just rattled off the 3 plays I run in EA College Football 26, so I'm all in on that plan.
Got the road.
It's working out just fine for me. We just won our 2nd national championship.
Yeah, and EA College Football is obviously the most realistic thing in the history of the world, right down to the drop animations. Tyler Wojciak, Locked On Irish, great stuff. As always, my man, appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.